I'm going to go ahead and call us to order for our regular meeting and declare that we have a quorum of 7 members present. We welcome you to this meeting of the College Station Independent School Board of Trustees. We were elected at large to represent the interest of our community and our state in educating our students. Our mission for our students in this district is success each life, each day, each hour. We adhere to all pertinent laws, policies, and procedures in posting agendas and conducting our meetings. The detailed agenda information was made available to us at least 72 hours in advance, and we have all come to this meeting informed and prepared. We have just completed a workshop meeting where we heard reports and discussed much of the information needed to make decisions in either this meeting or in upcoming meetings. This is a meeting of the 7 trustees in a public setting rather than a public meeting. As such, public comment is included on the agenda at a specific time and requires us to listen rather than take action so as to abide by the Open Meetings Act. We are pleased that you have taken time this evening to join us. We are very proud of this school district, and we thank you for your interest in and support of our students. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. We begin this meeting, as we do all of our meetings, by saying our pledges of allegiance to the American flag, the Texas flag, and having a moment of silence. We have some folks in here to lead us from both Spring Creek Elementary School and Creekview Elementary. I'd love to bring those young folks up here as well as their principals, Stormy Hickman and Jeff Duran, to introduce our leaders.
Do I need to talk into this? I'm shorter than Mr. Dr. Ely. Okay. My name is Stormy Hickman. I'm the principal at Spring Creek Elementary. I'm so excited to be here with you this evening. I'm excited to introduce Justin Boat-Calley, who is a 4th grader at Spring Creek. His favorite subject in school is social studies, and when he's not at school, he really loves to play outside. So I know that this good weather we're having has been really great for him to be able to get outside and play. And I also have Molly Morrison. Molly is a 4th grader at Spring Creek. She loves science as her favorite subject, and she loves to play with her friends whenever she is not at school. So one of the reasons that these 2 students are here is because they really exemplify what it means to be a Spring Creek Cardinal, and that is that they are kind and they make great decisions every single day. And so I appreciate that, and that's why I asked them to come and be here with us today.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Duran, principal at Creekview Elementary. We had a Hamiltonian Broadway-style number ready to go, but because of time limits and my singing voice, I will just say I'm proud to have Zach and Zoe Kosser with me this evening. Zach is in 4th grade. He enjoys math, and when he is not in school, he plays basketball and football. He's also a fan of both the Florida Gators and Texas A&M Aggies. I don't know how that works, but that's how it is. And his sister Zoe is in 2nd grade. She really enjoys reading, and she loves butterflies, especially monarch butterflies. So glad to have them here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I, the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. You're taking a picture with these people. So scoot in close to them. They're not. Okay.
We'll sign the pictures later for you. You've been wanting my autograph all night, haven't you?
It's freezing.
Thank y'all so much. Yeah. Mr. Harris, we get to recognize 3 state champions this evening. Very excited about that. We'll begin with our state championship in congressional debate. A&M Consolidated High School junior Abid Razvi recently earned a state championship in Texas UIL congressional debate contest. Abid bettered his effort of finishing second in last year's state meet by earning the top spot among all 5A competitors this year. Congressional debate is an individual contest in a large group setting. It models the legislative process of democracy, specifically the United States Congress. Within this mock legislative assembly competition, contestants draft legislation submitted to the tournament, and they research the docket of bills and resolutions dealing with real-world social and political policies prior to the contest to prepare their speeches. We could have used them at the workshop session. We talked a lot of politics then, didn't we? At the tournament, students caucus and committees deliver formal discourse on the merits and disadvantages of each piece of legislation and vote to pass or defeat the measures they have examined. Parliamentary procedure forms the structure for the discourse, and students extemporaneously respond to arguments over the course of a session. I'd like to welcome to the front 5A Congressional Debate State Champion, Abid Razvi. He didn't need it, yes, but he probably could. He's a smart kid. Congratulations, buddy. I'm proud of you. Oh, we take a picture? Are we good? Okay, excellent. We have Oh, sorry. Where's Marissa? Sorry. Marissa Pena is here. Thank you. His coach is Marissa Pena. Come on up. Sorry. Sorry, Isaac. No, I'm good. Sorry about that. We have 2 state bowling champions with us tonight. The Special Olympics state bowling champions, College View High School Bridges student Mark Reinberg and College Station High School freshman Isaac Walker recently won the state championship in their respective division of the Special Olympics state bowling champions. So first up is Mark Reinberg. Mark is a 2-time state champion now in bowling. This is his 2nd time to win state. Yay. And we have Isaac Walker, who also won in his bracket. Congratulations, Isaac. Really? 2 bones in your knees? Excellent. Congratulations. We also have, and you've seen him up here, the head coach of the bowling team is Mark Hollis, and assistant coach Randy Daniel. Please come on up. Assistant bowling coach, pretty good gig.
Sure, I can. I wanted to go ahead and speak on behalf of these 2 young men that we took to state this year. This was Isaac's first year to bowl. He's been very consistent, very steady as he went through. He went to state, and I believe his high score this year was a 94, which was above his average that he took in his bracket, and we're very proud of him for his first appearance at state and his first gold medal. Mark has bowled for us now. We've taken him to state 3 times. This is his 2nd time to win a gold medal at state. He bowled way over his head this time. I believe his scores, he bowled a 159 his first game. They bowled 3. And that placed him in 3rd place in his bracket. So what'd he do? He steps it up a notch. Second game, he bowled a 173, which bumped him right back up barely in first place. And then the third game, he put him away and bowled a 191. Anybody looking for a partner in their league, that's the guy you want to take with you. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much. Mr. Harris, that concludes our recognitions for this evening.
While we're getting seated, I'd like to recognize the artwork on the walls, which has been provided by students from College Hills Elementary, Creekview Elementary, Spring Creek Elementary, and A&M Consolidated High School. So thank you to those students who were kind enough to provide the artwork. The next item is our consent agenda, which would be items G, I1, J3, J4, J5, J6, J7, J8, and J9. Does anyone wish to remove any items from the consent agenda?
I would move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries 7-0. Okay. Item E1, board directions and reports, announcements, superintendent reports and announcements. Let's start with the board. Any reports from the board members?
We're going to hear the results of the DEIC last committee meeting, but they worked hard and a lot of complicated issues, and we'll approve the results of those tonight, hopefully.
Any other, okay. Superintendent report, Dr. Ely.
Yes, sir, Mr. Harris, members of the board. Just wanted to say to the assembled audience that when we met at workshop at 5 o'clock, part of our work was to set the schedule for the upcoming boundary adjustment workshops to address high school attendance boundaries. So I wanted to announce those to the public that our first meeting will be a workshop. Will be scheduled for Wednesday, March the 28th. That's a week from tomorrow. Will be at 5 p.m. And the purpose of that meeting will be to receive the feedback from, or the process that the administration used and the various options that will be brought forward towards the board. We'll be presenting that to the board on Wednesday, March the 28th at 5 p.m. We will follow that the next week, Monday, April the 2nd. We will be having a public forum for feedback on those particular options, and that will begin at 5:30. I'm not announcing exact locations because I don't want to say I'm wrong just in case, but we're endeavoring to have them all in here, but we'll double check to make sure that we can. We will have the first meeting after that public forum will be on Wednesday, April the 4th at 3 o'clock. And then we have another meeting scheduled for Monday, April the 9th. That will also be at 5 p.m. So we may indeed need additional meetings to go through this work, but I wanted to get those first 4 in everybody's schedule so we're aware. So those who are wanting to be witness the conversation can be here. So with that, that's my report.
Thank you. Item F, hearing of citizens. Do we have any cards? Okay, that takes us to item H1. Receive report related to special education, section 504, and dyslexia services. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. We spent a tremendous amount of time at the workshop session talking about the budget, and as part of his presentation, Mr. Martindale talked about the growth that we've seen since the 2010-2011 school year, both in overall students receiving special services, and kids who are bilingual in the ESL related services. We're experiencing a tremendous amount of growth. We educate about 1 in 10 or or so students in College Station ISD is receiving some sort of specialized instruction based on his or her identified needs. We have a large department that works very hard to meet the needs and all these varied needs of all these students, and it's led by Mrs. Molly Perry, who's Executive Director for Special Services Accountability. And what we'd like to do this evening is talk a little bit about what all we do with not only special education, but Section 504 and dyslexia, and some of the challenges and successes that we're seeing. So she has a fairly detailed presentation because it is a tremendous amount of work that takes place in College Station ISD for these students. So with that, Mrs. Perry.
Thank you, Dr. Ely, Mr. Harris, members of the board. As Dr. Ely mentioned, I do have quite a bit of information to share with you all this evening, but first I'd like to say how excited I am to be able to talk with you about something not necessarily related to assessment or accountability this evening. Although I love those things, certainly special services brings a different kind of joy.
I don't know if it's on.
Can you guys hear me on the mic?
No.
No, I don't think it's on.
They can't.
How about now?
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. All right. So first of all, what are we talking about when we say special services? Every district does things a little bit differently, but here in College Station ISD, what we're referring to really is anything disability related for our students. So that's going to be Section 504, special education, and dyslexia. As such, I will endeavor to use as few acronyms as possible this evening. However, if I misstep, please don't hesitate to stop me because we have a special kind of love for acronyms in the world of disability services. So we're going to start with Section 504, and what we mean by that is the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Section 504 is really just for short how we identify that law. It's not a program like special education. 504 is really an anti-discrimination law to prevent our students from not only being discriminated against, but also to ensure that they have equal treatment and access. And so it's really tied very closely with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So under 504, persons who are eligible, first of all, have to have some type of physical or mental impairment, but it also needs to limit a major life activity. By that, we're talking about walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, etc. And one thing that's very different about 504 versus special education is that it's a very broad definition. There's not a limited list or specific definition. And as such, we have seen a lot of growth in that area over the last few years. So what does it do if it's not a program? Well, not only does it ensure that students aren't discriminated against, but we are required to provide a free and appropriate public education, lovingly known as FAPE. And so when we talk about that, what we're talking about is that the services come at no charge to our families, that we're really individualizing and making sure that a student has a plan that's appropriate to their specific needs and that we're working collaboratively to do that. We, as a 504 committee, have to really, first of all, look and see, is the student eligible? And then as a result, what do they need? What types of accommodations and sometimes services like dyslexia or maybe a nursing plan? But ultimately, it's about protection of rights for that child, and an enforcing agency over 504 is the Office for Civil Rights at the federal level. So currently we have 1,340 students identified under 504. That does not include our students identified under special education, although they are of course afforded those same rights and protections. So these are students who are solely under 504. And the way that that works is that each campus has a Campus 504 coordinator that's designated to ensure that those meetings happen, that eligibility is established, that we're coordinating and making sure all of the different teachers have the accommodation plans, that we're communicating with families. That is most often a campus counselor and in some cases an assistant principal. We don't have a separate job description for a 504 coordinator. So then shifting over to special education. The federal law for special education is called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. That law was most recently reauthorized back in 2004, and it really focuses, similar to 504, on providing FAPE, or that free and appropriate public education, but the law actually starts at birth and goes all the way through the age of 21. Now, that 0 to 2 range most often is served through early childhood intervention, which is a separate agency from the school. But we do serve some of our babies, we call them 0 to 2, if they have visual impairments or auditory impairments jointly with ECI. Really, the services ramp up in the schools at the age of 3, and so we are required by law to have established eligibility by that 3rd birthday and begin providing services for children who are eligible. And so that's the other big piece of this particular legislation. It's not just about the service provision, but it's making sure that we're out there finding children, that we're working collaboratively with physicians and daycares so that we can identify, locate, and evaluate and ultimately serve eligible children. That includes children who are homeschooled or who attend private schools within the boundaries of our district. So what is this thing, special education? Well, if you think about what we talked about earlier, 504 is not a program. Special education really is. It's about specially designed instruction. It's about things that are above and beyond what we can provide in general education due to the severity or nature of that particular child's disability. And it could be in our classrooms, it could be in students' homes if they require homebound service. It could even be in a hospital if a student was confined for a lengthier period of time. So eligibility is a little more complex with special education. It requires a much more comprehensive evaluation to establish eligibility. There are much more stringent guidelines about what is a disability under IDEA, not only what the categories are, but what the specifics are for that eligibility at both the federal and the state level. And in order to be eligible, the student has to not only have one of those disabilities, but they also have to require the services of special education to ultimately become eligible. So let's talk a little bit more about what Mr. Martindale shared earlier in terms of our enrollment and our growth in our program. So these are raw numbers. They are snapshot numbers that last Friday in October when we collect student data. Just looking at special education, you can see a pretty steady growth if we go back to 2012 through 2016. So from that fall of 2016 to fall of 2017, we saw significant growth. And even since then, this last October, we were at 1268. We've grown by almost 300 additional students in the last few months and are currently sitting at 1394. So you're probably thinking, what is going on? What is happening? Absolutely. Well, something did happen in the fall of 2016. Now, typically, when you see shifts in trends in special education enrollment, it's going to be related to something like funding mechanisms at the state level, maybe accountability systems that maybe incentivize or disincentivize students to be eligible, or perhaps even looking at just differences in identification practices. In this instance, what I believe has really happened is that awareness has increased dramatically. There were a series of articles published not only in the state but nationwide focusing on special education in Texas. And there were a lot of accusations about an indicator within the performance-based monitoring and analysis state accountability system that set a target rate of 8.5% for identification in special education. So here in College Station ISD, we never really paid a lot of attention to that rate, even though our rate was pretty similar to the target that was set. But statewide, there was a significant decline after that rate was set into place. Now, there were some other variables that were happening, but back to fall of 2016, there was significant media attention on special education across the state. As a result, the U.S. Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs came and conducted an investigation. They toured around the state, held listening sessions, went into some districts, and even did an investigation into practices by talking with individuals. And ultimately, almost a year later, this last January, provided their findings to the state, indicating that, in fact, Texas was in violation of federal law for child find, that students were not being identified that should have been. And as a result, the state is in the process of developing a corrective action plan. In fact, we just received the latest draft of that 41-page document yesterday evening, so I am in the process of looking a little more closely at that. But ultimately, I think what it boils down to is awareness. We're receiving almost double the number of referrals for initial evaluation evaluations that we've seen in years past. And that's coming not just from parents requesting, but campuses as well. And so I would say that we've seen a trend that has shown to tick upward significantly, and I don't expect that that's going to change for at least the next year or so until things really kind of level out. And so as a result, as we progress through the presentation, I'll be talking a little bit more about the implications and impact of that growth. Another way to look at that growth is snapshot percentage of growth year over year. So the red line is our growth within the special education programming, and that's going to be year to year snapshot. And then the blue line is us as a district. Obviously, we've grown a lot since 2012 across the district, so we would, of course, expect to see some growth in special education. While that growth hasn't always been right there very tightly aligned, the trends have been somewhat similar in terms of up and down. Although you can see from 16 to 17, that's when the paths really diverged, and we saw a little over 3% growth as the district and 13% at the special education program level. Ultimately, what that means is since the fall of 2016 to now, we've grown almost 25% within the special education program. So what are the disability categories for which our students here in CSISD are identified? Well, I've broken it down, and at the recommendation of my peers who don't speak special ed, I added a little chart for you all to see what those look like. So right away, you can probably see our population of students whose primary disability is speech impaired is the largest category, followed very closely by specific learning disabilities. Then you'll also see a larger population of students with health impairments and autism. Certainly, the area of autism has grown significantly over the last 5 years especially. The number of students who are specific learning disabled has decreased just slightly, and then the area of OHI has also grown while emotional disturbance and intellectual disability has gone down just a little bit, but we haven't seen any wild swings. Again, this is primary disability, and many children have comorbidity. For example, learning disabilities and ADHD tend to have a high level of comorbidity. So then looking at that enrollment by campus, how are these students distributed across our schools? We're going high school down to elementary across. Of course, you would expect to see larger enrollments at larger schools. And then we've got a little line there for 18 plus. That's going to be our Project Search and Bridges programs, which I'll talk a little bit about later. We've got our middle schools. They're pretty tightly aligned. Our intermediate is not quite as much. We're still seeing some effects of grandfathering there, and we centralized some of our programs with the split to 3. And then you can see some growth at the elementary level, especially in certain areas that we're working to try to adjust through program location next year. So what do these supports really look like? Well, all students are general ed students first. Those Tier 1 instructional practices that are the core and the base of everything are available to all students. Special education is a layer of support, just like gifted and talented or bilingual. It's not a separate thing. And so all of our students have access to general ed in some way. Then there's more advanced supports along with in-class supports like co-teach or having a paraprofessional or other teacher come in to help provide in-class support in general education. And then there's those more specialized supports on the continuum that are going to be a removal from the general ed setting for at least part of the day into like a resource room or one of our specialized programs. So here's a sampling of some of our specialized programs that we do offer, with the caveat that other than our age of 18 plus programs like Bridges and Project Search, our other programs are all very much on a continuum. And so there are very few students who spend their whole day in these programs. That's very, very rare. So our life skills program is more for our students who have significant cognitive deficits, intellectual disabilities, along with adaptive needs. CASTLE is a program that's unique to our district, designed for students who have significant social learning needs, communication deficits that impact their learning and academics. Then adaptive behavior is going to be more for those students who have emotional, social needs. And then PPCD, or preschool program for children with disabilities, is everything from little ones that are coming to receive speech therapy to a self-contained preschool class where students who are age 3 through 5 can receive individualized supports. The two on the left, hopefully you guys have heard about. We've had a lot of wonderful press covering these programs over the last few years, are designed for those students who have completed their high school credits, but really still require specialized supports to help transition them into adulthood and the workplace. And we're very proud of those programs. They've really, really done beautifully. So how do we accomplish all of this? Well, I laid out sort of the roadmap of what those supports look like. Of course, there's me, executive director, but I also have two amazing assistant directors that divvy up a lot of the responsibility, along with 5 non-administrative coordinators who really focus in on instructional needs, taking care of those specialized program needs. Our related supports is going to be things like assistive technology, therapy, and then transition, because we're required to provide a comprehensive transition plan for every student as they turn 14 and plan towards their future. Our related and support group, we've got all kinds of therapists, from speech to OT to PT. We have added this year with federal funds a behavior specialist, which has been a wonderful addition. And then we do have one nurse on staff specifically for a student, and we provide nurses for a number of other students through contracted services. As far as teachers, we currently have 91 students serving the numbers that you saw earlier, over 1,300, along with some itinerant teachers like homebound, or going in and providing in-home training as a related service, our vision teacher, our orientation and mobility teacher. And then you can see we also have a number of instructional assistants, as well as some clerical support to make sure all that paperwork gets tied up and turned in. And then in our office, making sure we've got everything taken care of with documenting in the PEMS system, covering things like travel budget, purchasing the computer software program. It's very all sort of encompassing process. So let's talk money, in case you all didn't get enough of that during the workshop. There's a lot of numbers here, but I'm just going to break it down. We receive funding from a variety of sources. This is just special education dollars we're talking here. So you can see across the top, we've got 2 streams of federal money. Those are IDEA B funds, one's specifically for preschool. And then we have our local funds, and then we get a small amount of state vision funds for those students who are visually impaired. So you can see the total budget, including personnel, supplies, materials, contracted services, everything, is a little over $13 million. And of that, you can see just under 1.8 is going to be coming from federal sources. The rest is funded through state and local dollars, with the bulk of the funding, of course, going towards personnel. So how does that really work? So I said there were local dollars, and they are. We do receive some weights, though. And when Mr. Martindale talked earlier about average daily attendance and students actually coming to school to get the services and receive the funds, it works that same way in special education. In Texas, we have a system that is based on weighted funding. And so depending on what the student's instructional setting is, will depend on what that weight is for the student. So the more intensive services do provide some additional reimbursement. All right, let's shift gears one more time to dyslexia. So I saved dyslexia for last because it's a little unique. Here in Texas, we like to do things a little differently. And dyslexia, first of all, is defined specifically in the Texas Education Code a little bit differently than you might see at some national levels. But we're really talking about difficulty in reading, writing, spelling, despite really good opportunities for that student. And it does include related disorders like dysphagia or dyslexia or dysgraphia or spelling disabilities. The way students are served, though, is where things get a little tricky. Students with dyslexia can be just in general education. They could be in 504 with accommodations. They could be in 504 and getting direct intervention from a dyslexia teacher, or they could even be in special education. Just depends on their circumstances. Many states do include dyslexia as part of special education under specific learning disabilities, but we have all these very specific laws that allow us to serve under 504. 4. And so most often, if the reading disability is not severe, that's where these students are served. So primarily, those Campus 504 coordinators and sometimes ARD committees are the ones making sure that the plans are in place. We, from the special services standpoint, support those teachers. We have 11 currently serving all of our campuses, and we currently have 368 students receiving direct intervention from one of those 11 teachers. This is an area like special education that we've seen significant growth, and in fact, we did add a position at the semester to try to make sure we had coverage. So it is also an area that we're working towards. Just this last legislative session, there was a new law passed requiring screening of all kinder and first students at the end of the year to look at whether or not that might be a student with dyslexia. And so we anticipate that these numbers will continue to grow. So dyslexia budget's a little more simple. It's all local dollars. There is no weighted funding. There is no federal funding. And so primarily that is made up of personnel, those 11 teachers that you saw, along with the supply budget for the curriculum and materials and some professional development dollars to help ensure we can send these lovely ladies, currently all ladies, to professional development at least once a year outside of the district. So I'm going to end with challenges and successes. We'll start with challenges. I would say the big idea here is growth. As I mentioned several times, we've seen significant growth, and it really truly caught us a little off guard. We had pretty steady trends for a number of years, and so there is really truly no way we could have projected that in 18 months we would see a 25% increase in enrollment. And as a result, our teachers and our staff and our administrators have all been really working very, very hard to try to cover those needs, especially when it comes to things like referral rates and making sure those evaluations are conducted within timelines. So in addition to that growth comes the need to maintain quality of services. We oftentimes have families move here and tell us, we've heard you have a great program, so we want to be a part of it, which is wonderful. But we, in order to maintain that quality, have got to really work hard in managing the growth. And part of that is also supporting professional learning. These are not just students served by special education teachers. It's truly the whole faculty, especially when you introduce a new program into a campus, and really helping everyone to understand the needs and how to support the students. The funding is, of course, always a concern, especially when only about 13% is comprised from federal dollars. And the lack of funding for any 504 or dyslexia weights is certainly a challenge. So right now we're really working through prioritizing our staffing and our program needs. So I would expect that you'll hear more about that in the upcoming months as we work through the budget process. And finally, I would say one of our great challenges is that students with disabilities, with the exception of about 1% who have the most significant cognitive impairments, are required to meet the exact same standards as every other student. And so we're glad we have high standards, but that can certainly be a challenge when we are working with students who do have very significant needs. And successes. I would say, first of all, over the last few years, we've really worked hard to improve the provision of services in the least restrictive environment in general education for many of our students, to shift away from pulling out and doing resource as much. And that's been very successful, especially at the secondary level with our co-teach, meaning we've got 2 teachers in that classroom, special ed and general ed, planning together, implementing instruction together, and supporting kids together. We really worked very hard to set a solid foundation for that, and I've only heard positive feedback this year. I mentioned our Project Search and Bridges programs. Very, very proud of those. Another thing that we've tried that's been a little innovative over the last few years is at that intermediate level to prevent students from missing out on elective. We are providing dyslexia services during, I'm going to call it advisory because everyone calls it a little something different, but that period of time when we can do some intervention. It requires a lot of tricky planning because we're kind of all descending in one place to serve kids, but it's been fabulous that we've not had to make a choice between orchestra or dyslexia, and so that's been a great benefit. We've seen some good gains in closing that achievement gap, especially in math and science and on end of course exams, specifically algebra, US history, and biology over the last few years. And that really ties into that last bullet of improved performance on the PBMAS system. If you'll recall, the year before this one, as well as the year before, we were staged a level 3, primarily due to the performance of students with disabilities on STAR. And that's really tied into that initiative with more inclusive supports, and we're seeing the benefits of that. And as a result, this year we are only stage 1, which is wonderful. And then finally, alluding back to our earlier conversation about SHARS, or the School Health and Related Services Program, we re-enrolled in this program about 4 years ago, and we started seeing some of the benefits of that, but we are really generating a lot more reimbursement. So these are services in students' IEPs that are eligible for Medicaid. And so it's things we're already providing. We're just able to generate some Medicaid dollars as reimbursement, and it does not affect students' eligibility outside for those services. So we also think that that's been a great success. And with that, I would love to answer any questions or consider any comments you might have.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have questions, comments?
I have a general comment. I don't know how you do it, but you can make the most complex issues so easy for us to understand. I appreciate all the work you do to get some of the complex information to us so we can digest it.
Thank you.
And you did not use that many acronyms. Appreciate that.
Success. Put that on the list.
Thank you. That's well said. I also have kind of a general comment, and it's to thank you all of you, for the work you do, particularly for these students. And we recognize some here tonight that are part of these programs. And it had our core beliefs and commitments up, and we talked about making students productive citizens. And I think that means all students in CSISD, and this is a very big part of that. So thank you. And you're doing it in an environment where federal and state level governments are pushing these mandates or requirements down to us with no or immaterial added money, while at the same time complaining that we're spending more. So I want you to know that as a citizen, I appreciate it. Thank you for the good work you do. That's all I have. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Perry.
Thank you. Item H2, consider approval of CSISD District Improvement Plan Goals and Objectives. Dr. Ely.
Mr. President, members of the board, we go through an annual improvement planning process here in College Station ISD, as all districts do. And we've had the great opportunity this year to really look at and examine our overall district improvement plan. And what we have for you this evening is, for your consideration, is action on our district improvement plan goals. And with us to share just a little bit about that is Dr. Penny Trammell, our Chief Academic Officer, who has led us through this process. Dr. Trammell.
Good evening. Hope you all had a good spring break. DEIC, Mr. Weston was very accurate in his comment. DEIC has been working very hard, listening to reports from different departments, coordinators, and directors on the work that's being done on this year's plan, because we want to be sure that we're accomplishing what we set out to accomplish this year, and listening to recommendations based on data for next year's plan. At our last DEIC meeting, we divided up into groups. We considered the board's 5 commitments, and the DEIC members developed goals based on the data we have heard so far in the reports. And with that, after we divided up into groups, we came back together and voted as a committee on those goals. You probably recognize that they are highly aligned with the board's commitments to the community. These goals will guide our plan for the coming 2018 school year. Our objectives will flow forth from that, and we hope to have a plan to the board for approval by April. And I know that that is a rigorous goal. That's an aggressive goal, but we can do it. Tonight, we are asking that you approve the goals presented to you all by DEIC.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I'd like to thank the members of DEIC who contain a lot of community members that volunteer their time. So if you're out there, thank you. Any questions, comments?
I would move approval of the goals for the 2018-19 District Improvement Plan as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to item H3, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the eligibility ranking forms for Head Start and Early Head Start for 2018-19. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. As part of our Head Start and Early Head Start programs, we have to go out and look for and entice kids to come to College Station ISD who are in 3 and 4 years old. We have a lot of folks who are interested in being involved in Early Head Start and Head Start, so much so that we must move forward with an eligibility ranking form to rank the kids for their participation in the program. This is an annual process that we go through that has been work done on Ms. Jackson's part as well as the Head Start Policy Council, and it does require board approval to approve both the Early Head Start and Head Start ranking forms for the 2018-19 school year. And so with more information on that is Sharon Jackson, Director of Early Education Services.
Thank you, Dr. Ely, Mr. Harris, members of the board. This is similar information to some of you that we've presented before, and you've also seen it in your board packet. There was one small change at the very bottom. Previously under Other, you see the line that says family has or had children in any birth to 5 Head Start program. Previously it said in the CSISD Head Start program. We felt like it was more all-encompassing and a better opportunity for families moving into our area to also get that credit, if you will, those few points that add to that. Other than that, everything is the same on this particular ranking system, and we would be happy to answer any questions or just ask for your approval for this.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
You will note there at the bottom, Policy Council approved this in February.
I make the motion that we approve as presented, both plans.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. That takes us to J1, consideration approval of the purchase of network switches for Welborn Middle School from Avanex per Department of Information Resources contract for $95,830 using 2015 bond funds. Dr. Ely.
Mr. President, members of the board, we are working very hard to finish Welborn Middle School. We've got a little bit of a construction project going on south of town. Was very excited to see sunny skies today. And part of that project is outfitting the information and technology needs that we have on that campus. We have 2 items related to that. Item J1 would be the purchase of network switches from Avanex from DIR in the amount of $95,000. It would be the administration's recommendation. The board approve this purchase.
Okay, I'm going to abstain from discussion and voting on this matter, but the rest of you do not have to so abstain. So do you have any comments?
I would move approval of the recommendation as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so the motion carries 6 with 1 abstention. That takes us to item J2. Consider approval of the purchase of audio-visual equipment for Welborn Middle School, large venue areas and fine arts classrooms from Avanext for the Texas A&M University multimedia contract for $138,672.86 using 2015 bond funds. Dr. Ely.
Yes, sir, Mr. Harris and members of the board. This is a similar item. It's audiovisual equipment, as you see in your agenda. Is the administration's recommendation that you approve this purchase.
Thank you. I will again be abstaining from discussion and voting.
I would again move that we approve this as presented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries with 6 ayes and 1 abstention. That takes us to K1. Consideration, discussion, and possible action on the approval of an interlocal agreement with the City of College Station, Texas concerning infrastructure related to Riverbend Elementary School. Dr. Ely.
Mr. President, members of the board, we get the opportunity to work with our friends at the City of College Station on this project at Riverbend Elementary School. It's another construction project we have going on at this point. This is something that we do with the board and the council as we memorialize our agreement in regards to this project. So we have an interlocal agreement here for your consideration regarding the infrastructure that will go around Riverbend Elementary School. And with more details on that is John Hall, Executive Director for Facilities. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Dr. Ely. Mr. Harris, members of the board. One of the major projects identified in the 2015 bond package was for our Riverbend Elementary School project, which the board approved back in September of 2017. One of the processes that we typically go through in our projects like this is to create a traffic impact analysis that's required by the planning and development folks at the City of College Station, so that they can plan and design to improve the traffic infrastructure, roadworks projects, basically next to our projects. They have now completed the design of their work for the Riverbend Elementary area, which is primarily an expansion of the existing Holloman Drive South road, all the way from Dowling Road to Rock Prairie Road, where it terminates right there at our site. They have estimated a total cost for their project of $11,905,000 to accomplish this project, and are requesting that CSISD participate financially in this project up to a maximum amount of $395,500. This is all set forth in the ILA documents that are attached. The total project budget for Riverbend Elementary School approved back in September. I'm so sorry, I've got a typo there, but September of 17 included a city infrastructure budget for this work in the amount of $300,000. So this ILA surpasses that budget amount, but we did find that the remaining $95,500 could be picked up through our project contingency budget line item of $400,000. Which would leave us a remaining project contingency amount of $304,500 in the project contingency amount. So this is an action item that will require an approval of the attached resolution, which I would be glad to read aloud if so desired, or I could simply answer any questions you might have of it. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. I'm sure Dr. Wesson wants to read the resolution for it. I'd have a couple of questions, and then I'll turn it over. Are you still comfortable with the remaining project contingency budget of $304,500?
Yes, that should be more than adequate for us.
And then did our legal counsel review the ILA?
They did. Mike Gentry reviewed this very carefully before he sent back the specific language for us to include in this agenda.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm just excited that they didn't ask for more money. It's a small portion of that total budget.
Yeah.
For the havoc we're going to place on the streets. I make the motion, we approve as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? No, you can't. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Weston. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, that takes us to L1 and L2, for which the board will adjourn to executive session. So for L1, the board will meet in executive session to discuss school safety. The executive session deliberations will be held pursuant to deliberation regarding security devices or security audits closed meeting exception to the Texas Open Meetings Act as set forth in section 551.076 of the Texas Government Code. And for item L2, the board will meet in executive session to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee. The executive session deliberations will be held pursuant to the personnel matters closed meeting exception to the Texas Open Meetings Act as set forth in section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code. Yeah. Right. We don't anticipate taking action, but we will come out of executive session to adjourn after that. You're welcome to stay if you like.
We'll look forward to seeing everybody after we're done with these meetings when we come back up.
Thank you. Okay, we're adjourned.